The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode 145.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Star Trek Discovery first season episode, The Wolf Inside. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, if you've not yet done so, please remember to subscribe to The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. So yes, we are talking about The Wolf Inside. This is the first season of Discovery, the second half, so the part where they have traveled to the Mirror Universe, and this is the second episode of that part of the season. This is what we pretty much agree. This is when Discovery started to get good, as opposed to the
At least
first
better.
half of the season.
I would say got more interesting.
Yeah, there we go. It got better. Got better. So the short form, the synopsis of this episode, they're still stranded in the Mirror Universe. Burnham is on the Shenzhou, the mirror version of the Shenzhou, as captain. She's given an order to wipe out a group of rebels against the Terran Empire, and she's trying to find a way to save them while not blowing her cover as the daughter of the Terran Emperor. And meanwhile, Ash Tyler is having flashback, emergence, Manchurian Candidate issues of his own, which may jeopardize everything.
Also, they have Stamets is in a compromised state because he's crazy with spore activity in his brain.
Yes.
And the reason that Burnham and Ash and Lorca are on the Shenzhou is because they need to get information out of the Terran Empire's computer core about how the Defiant ended up in the Mirror Universe, so they can try to find a way back to their own universe.
Right.
And Lorca is in a torture box.
Yes. And this is not the Deep Space Nine Defiant, but an older Starfleet vessel, of course.
This is referring back to the TOS episode, Tholian Web, and then the Enterprise Mirror Universe episode.
Yes, the Enterprise series. Yes, that's right. So one of the behind-the-scenes bits to talk about just before we get into things is the decision that the Terran Empire rebellion would consist of the Andorians, Tellarites, Vulcans, and Klingons was made because, with the exception of the Klingons, those were 3 of the 4 founding members of the United Federation of Planets in the Prime Universe, with the humans from Earth. And as a result, as they said, I think Ted Sullivan, who was the co-executive producer, said, it seemed to make sense that they represent a union of hope in the Mirror Universe. So the same sorts of factors that allowed them to come together in the Prime Universe are what bring them together in the Mirror Universe, I guess is what he's saying.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. It's like this is effectively the Federation with the Klingons and Earth swapped for the leadership role. Although it's not entirely consistent with the Mirror Mirror episode of the original series, because there were Vulcans serving on the Enterprise in that, including Mr. Spock with his goatee.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which is mirrored, so to speak, in this one by Sarek having a goatee, which I think was a very nice touch. Yeah.
So we open on an absurdly dense space debris field.
Yes, again.
As always in this episode.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, this series always, a lot of Star Trek always has, the things are way too close together in space. There should be much more room. Burnham's captain. She has basically put down an attempted coup, killed a guy, and thus solidified her position. And she's making this log entry about how it's going, and talks about things like how even the light in this universe is different, and turns out the mirror Saru is her personal slave.
Right.
And she notes that how pretending to be like the Terrans is slowly changing her, taxing her empathy, and she says it's getting easier to pass as one of them, which is interesting.
Right. Well, just real quick, I want to talk about the light. That actually is significant later on.
Yeah.
Because we find out that the light in the mirror universe actually is different. It's not just it seems like it's lost its brilliance. It actually is darker in general in the mirror universe. And that's why Lorca has the issue with his eyes, as all Terrans do, although we don't see the Emperor Giorgio later on. They aren't showing her doing the eye drops. But we find out that is actually a trait of a Terran who comes over to Prime Universe, is that the light affects them because it's so much brighter in the Prime Universe.
Right.
One thing that I was thinking about through this sequence is you really have to give Discovery credit for its visual design. It's very cinematically shot. It is visually much more, even though the plotting and so forth is not as good as other Star Trek series is, or at least as some of them. Cinematically, this is gorgeous.
Oh yeah,
and it's the shift in what a televisual production can be today compared to the 1990s, let's say, or the 1980s. It's just head and shoulders above that. So it really is gorgeous to look at.
That's true. Yeah, compared Enterprise to this, and it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. One thing that I found that in this opening sequence we're talking about that I thought was stupid was, Mirror Saru is Burnham's servant, and she says to him, "What's your name?" And he says, "A slave has no name." And it's like, that's stupid. Clearly the writers have no understanding. I mean, they want to portray slavery as a bad thing, which it is, yes, but you want to understand the thing you're criticizing, unless you're following the advice of Steve Martin's grandmother's song, criticize things you don't know about. Because of course slaves have names. They have always had names throughout human history, because if you've got more than one of them, you need to be able to tell which slave what you want that slave to do.
Better than, hey, you.
Yeah. Often the slave, I mean, if you've got 10 slaves and you say, "Slave, do this," well, how do they know which one is supposed to do it? And so, frequently the masters would pick the names of the slaves, like in ancient Greece in the 1st century. Christos was a common slave name because it meant useful. And there's actually a place in the New Testament. Now, Christos also was just a normal word in Greek. It wasn't just a slave name. It was also a normal word that just meant useful. And Paul, at one point in his letters, does a play on words, or what looks to me like a play on words. It's often translated in English as, because he's talking about, do I want to die and go to heaven and be with Christ, or do I want to stay here and do ministry on earth? And he says, for me, to live is, the way it's commonly translated, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And what does it mean to say to live is Christ? Well, it looks like a play on words. To live is Christos is what he means when what he writes is Christos. And he means to live is useful, but to die would be to gain.
Interesting.
Right. And
in
useful
any event,
would come across as being in the context to be a slave to Christ.
Useful to Christ, yeah.
Yeah.
So in any event, slaves have names. Try to understand the thing you're criticizing a little bit.
Right.
I mean, you just go back to Alex Haley's roots, and the whole Kunta Kinte and Toby. I think it was Toby, but the name and that whole scene. If you're at all familiar with roots, which you should be if you're criticizing, say, American slavery, you'd see that. Yeah, it is kind of dumb that they wouldn't have a name for it.
Even just to be able to say, "I am slave number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5." That's my name. Slave number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is my name.
Yeah, I get that.
And it applies even more broadly than just slavery. I mean, the same thing would happen with household servants. If you watch Upstairs, Downstairs, in the first season of that, there's a servant coming on board staff who has kind of a fantasy life about being rich and famous, and she introduces herself as Clemence de something or other, some really exotic-sounding French name. And she's told immediately, okay, that's not an appropriate name for a servant. You're going to be Sarah.
Right. Right.
But one thing I did like about this, though, is because Burnham has to let Saru do things for her. Like, essentially, he bathes her.
Right.
And he brings her food and stuff like that. And this is really creeping her out. And she has to go along with it. And she's afraid of being corrupted by this. I've had, not afraid of being corrupted by it, but I've had a similar experience. Because I tend to be very self-sufficient. I do not like imposing on others. I want to be as little bother as possible to other people. And so for a number of years, I took train trips across the country. And I would get on the train, and I would immediately arrange the sleeping compartment the way I wanted it. I would put the beds down. I would put my luggage on the top bed. They would stay that way for the rest of the voyage. I did not want the steward coming in and putting them up and down and turning them into chairs instead of beds and things like that. I didn't want the steward turning down my bed at night. You know, I didn't want any of that because I didn't want to be a bother. But what I realized was, and it was very uncomfortable for me, to let a steward do something that I'm perfectly capable of doing in this personal space. But I eventually realized this is how they earn their tips. Yeah, they want to do things so that they can get a bigger tip. And so I found ways to let them do things for me, like, okay, maybe I'll eat in my sleeping compartment and they can go, bring the meal on a tray or something. But so I found a way to compromise to get them what they wanted without having them do everything for me, which I just was not comfortable with. Right.
So there actually was a funny behind the scenes thing with what's the name, Jones, the actor who plays Saru. Yeah, he actually talked about how he kind of made the actress very uncomfortable by having to do all these things for her, and she was like kind of creeped out by him doing these. She was like, "Oh, I took great pleasure in doing these things," because it really creeped her out. She was really uncomfortable with me serving her. But it's that interesting. Like, here's her captain essentially, and who used to be her crewmate, now a slave, and you really do feel that creepy. Like, wow, that's really weird, and I can see how that's creepy. So she also says in this that Ash reminds her of having him there with her, reminds her of everything good and what she wants her world to look like, which in retrospect at the end of the episode and what we saw at the end of last episode where Ash kills Culber, that's really portentous, let's say. There's a big twist in that the audience knows about that the character doesn't.
Burnham also, in her opening montage, has an execution before breakfast.
Yes.
Where some people have been convicted of having treasonous thoughts against their empress, and so they're beamed out into space. She also gets a message from Saru.
Prime Saru, yeah.
And they're talking about the progress of the mission, and we learn they're both hiding information from each other. Right. Because Saru asks, "Have you met any Kelpians?" And she's like, "Nope." and meanwhile, Saru is hiding from her the fact that Culber has been killed.
They think Stamets.
By Stamets, they think. And so and he's right. And they're actually both right. Sharing this information with the other would distract them from what they need to do.
Right. Right. Although if she'd known about Culber, would she might have suspected Ash? Probably not. Yeah,
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. She didn't have any kind of clue that he was really a double agent or anything like that.
She's got the love goggles on for him right now.
Yep,
that's right. And then after that scene, then we get the opening. Like the opening teaser for this episode is 15 minutes long.
Yeah, that's like probably one of the longest teasers ever.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. And part of the reason is because all this is a prelude to the main plot device of this episode, which, as I mentioned, the orders that they get to destroy the resistance on this planet and the Klingon resistance leader whose code name is Firewolf. Now, a couple of things
that was a web browser, right? Firewolf.
Yeah, yes, my Firewolf browser. Yeah.
I thought that was a starfighter or something.
Yes, or a movie starring Clint Eastwood where he steals a Russian mind-controlled
Jet.
jet.
Yep.
Thank you. A couple of things with this episode. Watching it now, knowing what I know from the end of the season, this first season, is Lorca in this episode, and the things he says and the things he does gain a new significance in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
What we see of Tyler, that kind of gets clarified by the end of the episode. We have his situation clarified, but we also have throughout this episode references to the Terran Emperor, and to remember, as I had to remind myself, we didn't know who the Terran Emperor was until the end of this episode.
Correct.
When she shows up on the bridge. And
In a hologram.
In a hologram, right. And that they call her the Emperor, not Empress, partially as a way to hide that fact. If they'd said Empress, we might have gotten it.
And there's precedent for that in various human cultures. Like in ancient Egypt, when Hatshepsut was pharaoh, she was not queen. That was not her title. Her title was pharaoh.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she would even
Right.
wear the little fake ceremonial beard.
Wasn't there a Polish woman who was called king as well? What was her name? There was a Polish king. She had the title of king, but she was a woman.
The
for
woman
whatever
king?
reason. Yeah. I have to look that up. I know about it because of in the game Civilization. That she's in it, so that's how I'm not, all that.
somebody who's more of a civilization geek will know it probably.
Yeah. I'm not knowing this because I'm super intellectual and know things. It's because I played the game.
There's also a Battlestar Galactica episode called The Woman King.
Oh, okay, yes. So Lorca tells Burnham she's got to kill this resistance group because they've got a bigger mission ahead of them, and she's like really resistant. No pun intended. But he tells her sometimes the end justifies terrible means. And this is where we're starting to see that Lorca mirror universe personality really starting to assert itself here. Also, maybe he's been through so much of the torture agonizer chamber for long enough that he's starting to get a little desperate.
Yeah, he's really a tough guy. I mean, being willing to he's from this universe. He knows what those tortured agonizer boxes do to you. And he's willing to just live in one of them for the sake of this mission. I mean, wow. How much tougher can you get?
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
it almost pushes believability a bit.
Oh, it does push believability.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though, where Burnham says, everything you're going through it's obviously affecting your mind, and of course we're thinking, at this point we're thinking, Lorca, this Starfleet captain, he's starting to lose it because of this torture. And no, it's the other way around. It's his mask is slipping.
Yes.
His mask as Prime Lorca is slipping, and real Lorca is starting to come out.
Right. So Burnham figures out she has a plan for how to save the Resistance. Because she wants to go down and find out how does a Klingon end up leading all of the major Federation races in an alliance of hope, she says.
And
That's a little dumb. It's like, no, you save the Resistance because it's the right thing to do. Because she wants to go back to the Prime Universe and bring that with her to figure out how to make peace with the Klingons.
Yeah, we saw how it's like, Michael, we've seen how your efforts to apply knowledge from other cultural contexts of how to relate to the Klingons has not really worked out well for you in the past.
Look, just figure out how to save them, then get back to your own universe and be done with it.
How are the Klingons working with the Tellarites and the Andorians and the Vulcans? Desperation.
Desperation. Yeah. Right. So make them desperate. I'm not sure that's the way they. Yeah.
It didn't work out last time either, though.
Yeah. So her plan is for her and Ash to beam down alone without a landing party and not to blast them from orbit. What's that line from Aliens? Nuke them from orbit. They decide not to nuke them from orbit. They beam down and surrender. And then, of course, the big reveal is that Firewolf is Vok. And we have this scene, and Tyler is a little, seeing himself
He's
a little messed
getting
up.
progressively more freaked out.
Yes, he's losing it. Now, to determine if Burnham really does come in peace, they call in someone they call the Prophet to tell us she's lying, and it's Sarek with the beard, and he does a mind meld on her. He sees her actual Prime Universe memories, but doesn't tell anyone, but just vouches for her.
Yeah,
which
he
is
says he
interesting.
sees a world full of promise and hope, and she means us no harm.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's curious that he doesn't reveal.
They would
Yeah.
take that as meaning, I see a world of promise and hope for us.
Right.
For the future. Yeah. So, yeah, that is interesting that he doesn't tell them for whatever reason.
Well, it would kind of complicate matters to say,
Right.
guess what? She's not even from our universe.
Yeah. And so but what's it to him? Like doesn't the boss there need to know? See, he has a reason for not revealing it. He very instantly determines that he needs to keep this secret for her.
The fact that he sees himself, or the Prime Universe version of himself, raising her as his daughter. I mean, that's probably a good reason right there to say, what's going on here?
Is it an emotional reaction or a logical reaction? That's the thing.
It could be both, but I would think it was certainly justifiable logically. What Firewolf Vok has asked is she trustworthy? And
yes,
she is, and that's what I'm going to tell him, and I'll add just enough supporting detail that there's a lot of promise and hope here. She really means us well, but I'm not going to complicate it beyond that because he doesn't need to know beyond that.
And he's probably trying to figure it out for himself. How is this possible?
And meanwhile, they're not getting bombed from orbit, so let's keep things on a good level. Yeah. So in the negotiations and the discussions, Ash, meanwhile, like we said, he has a flashback to his torture and his reassignment of species surgery
and other activity with Laurel.
Yeah, and then attacks Mirror Vok as Vok is explaining how Klingons came to work with others, and because the reaction is no, remain Klingon. That was the whole justification for the war. T'Kuvma. We need to be separate from other races, not working with them like this Vok is. So you have therefore betrayed. You who is me has betrayed, and mental break.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
And other than saying no, Michael stands back and totally lets him attack Vok.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's like, why aren't you intervening? This goes on for some time.
Right. Like, I don't think she has her phaser at this point, but
she doesn't. But she could still grab him. He doesn't have a phaser either. She could grab him and restrain him, or try to. That would at least show the other people there she is not approving of his actions.
Right. After he's restrained. Yeah.
Yeah. She does say something later, but he of course gets beat up by Volk. So.
And isn't it Sarek who stops them from killing him at this point, right? Isn't it? I forget now.
I think because he said something like, I can't vouch for him, but she's the one that we need to listen to, basically. She's the one who's innocent, or not innocent, but she's the one that means us no harm.
Yeah.
Right. Meanwhile.
So the plan is that she's going to let them have time to evacuate, and then she's going to photon torpedo their one very small base that they have had hidden under active camouflage for 2 years, meaning a cloaking device, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing she wanted in exchange, now I thought because she's got a floppy disk with the information about the Defiant on it, and she's telling him, but I'm going to want something in return for letting you go. And the thing she wanted in return, I thought, would be get this information to the Discovery. But no, the thing she wants in return is tell me how you all work together, which is dumb. And and then they also give her a little data pyramid that contains information on their listening outpost, but it's encrypted. And they say, by the time you decrypt this, we'll have gotten everybody away from these listening posts. And that's evidence she can use to make it look like her mission was a success.
Right.
They're telling them that their rebel base is on Dantooine, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, which has the same results in this case. So meanwhile, back on Discovery, Tilly and Saru have been talking about Stamets and what to do about him. And Tilly convinces Saru that medical science, the standard medical science, is not going to help Stamets. Only her knowledge of the mycelial networks stuff is going to save him, and convinces him to let her experiment on him with the mycelial spores.
Yeah, so they juice him with spores. There's a bunch of hand-wavy stuff about his brain is doing strange things with the interdimensional internet, and we need to give him more spores so the rest of his brain can come back online.
Right. But she ends up killing him, essentially. He's
essentially. Dead. Also, she's got this one line in there. Now, she says, this is a spore issue, which means I'm the one who's qualified to treat him here. And at one point, but she so undermines that when she says, fungi are the only organism with the biological aptitude to link death with life. And I'm going, no, that would be every organism, and certainly every organism that eats another organism, like us.
Yes. Well, there's also a weird moment where she interrupts this effort to save the guy who can get them back to the universe by networking for a better job. Oh, am I doing a good enough job that you can recommend me for the command training program? Which Saru would say, that's inappropriate at this moment. Let's talk about this after we've got everything fixed, which is kind of what he says.
Yeah, he says, if we get back to our universe, I'll consider it.
Yeah.
But Stamets suffers heart failure, and they bring in people into the reaction cube where he is to restart his heart. And they've got one of those, it's like the little handheld device you use to jumpstart your cars these days. Mm-hmm. They've got one for his heart. They bring it in, they put him on him, and they can't restart his heart. And I'm just, in my mind, shouting with Gene Wilder from Young Frankenstein, hearts and kidneys are tinker toys. Right. By the 24th century, slap a new heart in him if you got to. I mean, this is nothing. He should not be dying of heart failure here.
Well,
right.
And then, after he dies of heart failure, they just leave. Everybody leaves except Tilly, and they've just got this dead guy in the reaction cube there.
Well,
right.
I love, too, where the device they use to restart his heart is basically just a future version of an AED. Even hook up to the same spot as you do with an AED.
Right. That technology has not advanced at all.
The only difference is instead of having a box that's set next to the person, it's actually all in one piece. With a cable connecting the two parts. That's it.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. So back on the Shenzhou, the ISS Shenzhou, Michael confronts Tyler, and he's finally able to say that he's Vok, and he has a complete break. And I like how the actor, because again, we didn't, until now, these last two episodes, we didn't know they were the same character. Mm-hmm. His voice changes when the Vok is emerging, and I like how he's
speaking Klingon.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that come out. I like how he does that here. I think the actor does a good job.
Well, and also how he acts, because at first he's still confused. He's not sure what's going on. He's trying to figure out, but then you see through the scene, he's getting more and more confident and more cocky and more Volk.
Yes.
And so it's his whole personality is changing through the scene. And I think he did a really good job with that.
And his diction changes, like the way he speaks, even in English, becomes more formalized, like an alien who would be speaking in a formalized English. I kind of like the way they handle that. He ends up attacking Burnham, and she's only saved when Slave Saru comes in and flings him across the room, which is awesome.
That was set up earlier in the episode by twice having Saru come into her quarters unannounced.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, I mean, I was like, so shouldn't you ring first before you come in? But I think in some, I know that I once saw a piece about how they train butlers.
Mm-hmm.
And, and one of the things they do today in butler training is treat absolute discretion. So if you go into your employer's bedroom and someone is in bed with him, you don't acknowledge that fact as a butler. You just go in and you interact and you find what you need to do. And if your employer tells you something about, oh, please get us breakfast, oh, what would you like? And both of you, but otherwise you just don't acknowledge anything is going on.
Yes.
And I guess that kind of discretion, of course, would be expected of the captain's personal servant, Saru. And so maybe that's why he gets to just walk into her quarters unannounced.
Right.
As he does when she's, romancing with Ash earlier in the episode. But they've set that up. They'd have him come in to do her daily ablutions, and they've had him come in when she was romancing with Ash, and that's all a setup for him coming in unannounced to save her when Ash is attacking her.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it could also be part of that the personalization, he's so beneath notice that he doesn't even have a name. Therefore, you wouldn't expect a robot servant to come in and or that sort of thing. I suppose that's possible too.
Yeah, but that's misunderstanding the situation. I mean, frankly, in the ancient world, people knew when you had slaves have ears. Yeah, and there are some things you don't say in front of them, and some things you don't expose them to, because they can gossip and it can get out to your enemies in the Senate, and then you can have a big problem when you're Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso and you're being tried for an attempt to assassinate the emperor. And so this is just, again, understand the thing you're criticizing.
Right. So he she's saved by Saru, and her guards who are outside the door also see. And so there's no way for her to prevent Ash from being hauled away for execution, because the law is clear. If you attack the captain, you are immediately sentenced to death. And meanwhile, before that can happen, we see Stamets, who is apparently not dead yet, in the mycelial network, meeting his mirror universe counterpart, who says something to the effect of, "Oh, you're finally here. Great. We need to get to work." That sort of thing. So interesting there. Mm-hmm. Burnham is going to execute Tyler in the same way that we saw prefigured earlier in the episode, by beamed into space, where in this case she does it. I'm going to do it personally because it was personal. She beams him into space, and he's immediately picked up by Discovery. I'm kind of wondering, so is Discovery cloaked? Like, how is the other ships around there not seeing Discovery?
Well, they had contact with Discovery previously. So they know Discovery is there in the ridiculously cluttered debris field.
Right.
That's why they had Tilly impersonate Captain Killy.
Right. But when they went to this planet, Discovery must have come along with them and is just hanging out there. It's very
on the other
weird.
side of the planet or something, or
I think people in the mirror universe see only what they want to see, because they don't see that Ash is immediately beamed away.
Yeah.
And they don't see when Ash and Burnham have beamed down to the planet, they don't see them surrender. And they don't see them go to the invisible camp that turns visible and remains visible. And they don't. It's like, aren't you monitoring your captain on a dangerous mission to meet this rebel leader?
Right.
No.
Right. Yeah.
There's
a couple of holes there.
When being contrarian to the those in charge means your death sentence, you generally tend to just keep your mouth shut and do what you're supposed to do, and that's it.
Or find it an opportunity to betray her to her superior.
Right.
But in any case, he's beamed onto Discovery. He's been used as the bowl to carry the USS Defiant data that was Burnham had been sent to get. And Saru already knows about Ash's betrayal and that he's a mole. He's a sleeper agent among them. So somehow she had communicated this to them in the interim. So we are to assume, I guess.
Yeah, and we have at least seen her communicating with the Discovery.
Yeah.
The way they did it earlier in the episode was they had Tilly place the call, pretending to be Captain Killy, and then she handed the mic over to Saru.
Yes, right. So Burnham goes to Lorca saying, "Okay, I got the data. It's time to leave the Shenzhou," and he doesn't want to go yet. Now we know why he doesn't want to go yet. His plan is still in motion. But he says it's because they need to make sure that the Defiant data is useful before they give up their access to more classified data. But like I said, he's waiting actually for the Emperor to show up so he can get close to her and assassinate her. And that's what happens as they're on the ship, on the bridge of the Shenzhou. A unseen ship starts firing at the surface of the planet and obliterating it.
And yeah, widespread, unnecessary detonations all over a hemisphere of this planet when there was one little hidden base that you had the coordinates to.
Right. Yeah, their targeting is really off.
Well, if you want to get rid of, like, say, a bed bug infestation, you just burn down the house. I mean,
right, exactly, exactly. And then that's when we have the appearance of the Emperor on the in a hologram on the bridge, and it's Emperor Giorgio, and that's the big reveal at the end of the episode that we're supposed to and we all did win. Whoa, it's Giorgio's back. So
and we didn't realize the awesomeness that was coming with that reveal.
Yes, the awesomeness of Emperor Giorgio. So that's how it ends. Father Cory, any final thoughts?
Nope, nothing else.
Jimmy?
I found myself, so we had a lot of Stamets in the Spore Cube in this kind of laying back position with his arms exposed. And we get a lot of footage of the shunts that they put in his arms to interface him with the ship. And I've always found those interesting, but really annoying, because if those things are to let him have mycelial stuff flowing into and out of him, we have shunts now that are far less intrusive than those things. And those things are put in a stupid part of his body because not only are your forearms not central distribution nodes for things in your body. If you want spores moving around in you, you don't think let's put them in the forearms.
Right.
Those are an extremity, and so they're not centralized. But also, we have all these muscles and tendons in our forearms that help us use those useful devices called our hands. And they've basically taken all of those out of him and apparently replaced them with something that's a robotic equivalent. But why? Just put a shunt near a major artery and be done with it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like they have shunts today, like somewhere in the torso. Just a little tube that connects. That's all it needs to be.
Because it looks cooler to have him just bare his forearms and get jacked up instead of having to take, something, Johnny Mnemonic style into the back of your head or something
that's
like that,
what That's what should be like, right in the back of the neck. That would have been awesome. All right. So I think that does it for this episode. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Lynn F., Suzanne S., Dennis S., Fonseca B., and Mary C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. Now's a great time to become a StarQuest patron, thanks to a generous gift from a StarQuest supporter. When you start a new Patreon monthly pledge at sqpn.com/give, the first 3 months will be matched by an equal amount from our donor to support all our shows, including this one, making your gift go even further. And we're more than halfway to our goal of $2,000 in new monthly pledges, so why don't you help us close the gap? If you've been thinking of becoming a StarQuest patron, now is the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. So that's it from us. What did you think of The Wolf Inside? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the original series episode, The Galileo 7, which is a classic. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Tom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, live long and prosper, and always remember Steve Martin's grandmother's advice: criticize things you don't know about.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, I see a world bursting with potential, and a child molded by wisdom, and a seemingly impossible depth of human compassion.